5 tips how you can improve your sewing quality. These tips are very small, but they will have a big impact to your sewing results. This video is created in partnership with Organ Needles, needle industry experts. Tip number 1, get into a habit of analyzing ready-made clothes. This is actually how I currently get most of my knowledge and get most inspiration for my future projects. So let's take one example. This is the polo shirt that I bought for my toddler. From this t-shirt alone, you can learn a few great techniques such as how to sew and make that front buttonhole placket. Also, you can learn how to sew this neckline back seam cover, how to sew the finishes of the sleeves, and how to create the slits at the sides. Every single time when I'm buying something ready-made, or if I'm just in the shop browsing, or if my husband buys something, I spend a bit of time analyzing how that garment is made, what can I learn from that, and how can I apply this in my future projects. Ready-made clothes are actually a very good physical visual teaching aid that will help you learn how to sew better. Second tip how you can sew better is read the sewing machine manual. I have to admit, when I was younger, I had a little bit of sewing experience, and if I would buy a new sewing machine, I would never read the manual because I felt like I knew everything I needed to know already. But then I would be using the machine for several years and I would accidentally need to read something in the manual, and I would discover new things and new features on my sewing machine that I could have used all that time, but I just didn't know that my sewing machine had that. So nowadays, sewing machine manuals really have a lot of information how to sew better, how to get better results, how to troubleshoot, how to get good quality seam, and it's a very good helping aid to help you sew better. I'm waiting for a new sewing machine to arrive, and I already know that I will be spending a few evenings just analyzing the manual before I even touch the machine and before I start sewing. Give this tip a try, find the manual of your sewing machine and just read through it, and I think you will discover something new about your sewing machine which will help you sew better. Third tip, if you want to improve your sewing results, is get familiar with different types of interfacing. Interfacing, I feel, is not talked about enough, and I should probably do a whole separate video because this is a teeny part of the sewing process that really helps create better quality results and make the sewing experience smoother. For example, if you want to stabilize the fabric before adding the zipper, add a strap of fusible interfacing. This will stabilize the fabric and make sure it's not stretchy. So this will help avoid bubbling or waving of the fabric, which very often happens when you sew the zipper without interfacing. Another idea is when you are sewing sharp corners, you want to put a tiny piece of fusible interfacing so that when you're making a cut into the corner, the fabric is held in the place and it's not falling apart. Creating a sharp corner without the fusible interfacing is really a difficult task. And that tiny piece of fusible interfacing makes such a huge difference. So here are just a few examples how you can use the fusible interfacing and get better results. But as I mentioned, this is a very big topic, and I do encourage you to research on different applications, on different types of fusible interfacings, and start using them in your projects, and you will see how instantly your sewing quality is improving. Fourth tip how to improve your sewing quality is get better at fitting. For me personally, the individual sewing is all about getting that fit, because when I go to the store, I cannot find a garment that fits my figure. My figure is not a standard one. So for me, a great fitting clothing is one of the main reasons why I like to sew in general. I used to really struggle with fitting before going to sewing school, but nowadays it's really an easy task for me because about 90% of fitting happens before I sew the first seam on sewing machine. So first step that you want to do when fitting is to take a lot of measurements and to take a lot of accurate measurements. Usually to select the pattern size, you take the bust, the waist, the hip measurement. However, to fit the pattern to your measurement, this is not enough. And you want to take measurements like shoulder length, you want to take the torso length, the hip height, the bust height, the front width, the back width, a lot of different measurements. And by having those measurements, you will be able to fit the garment properly to your figure. Second step, when you have those measurements taken, you want to apply them on the pattern paper and make sure that the pattern paper fits your figure. Let's say if I'm working with Burda pattern, I know that Burda patterns have shorter torso than my torso, so I will always be first lowering the waistline in the Burda patterns to match my waistline. Additionally, I also know that my hip line is by 2 centimeters lower than the standard. So this is again something that I would measure and adjust in the pattern before cutting the pattern from fabric. By adjusting the paper pattern, you already are able to solve a lot of fitting issues. This will take you a little bit of time to research and learn how to do it, but you will be able to apply those changes through multiple designs in your future. Third step, when you have the measurements taken, when you have the pattern fitted on the paper, you cut it from a piece of fabric, and before you sew it on the sewing machine, you want to base stitch the garment, put it on and see how it fits. This will give you a very good idea how the design will fit you, and you will be able to solve any small fitting issues that are left from fitting the paper pattern. And only then, when I know that the pattern is adjusted to my figure, when I know that the base stitch version fits me well, only then I move to the fourth step, which is sewing the garment and then doing a fitting with more seams sewn. And usually in this fourth step, I really need to do only minimal changes, if anything at all. Knowing how to fit your garments properly will solve a lot of frustration in the sewing process, and your garment quality will increase significantly. Let me know in the comments if fitting is a topic that you would like to see more. 5th tip how you can improve your sewing quality is use appropriate needles. Selecting and using right needles for every project was a habit that I picked up at sewing school. Before that, I would just have one single standard size needle on my sewing machine, and I would use it for sewing everything. And then I would be surprised why the seams are not turning as good as they're supposed to. Back at the sewing school, we had a lot of industrial sewing machines, and right next to every single machine, we had several different needles. We had a small size needle for lightweight fabrics. We had a size 90 universal needle, which is most commonly used to sew a lot of garments. And we also had a high size needle to do top stitching or sewing thick fabrics. We also had a jersey needle, which has a rounded tip and is suitable for sewing knit fabrics. So knit fabrics are constructed in a different way than woven fabrics, and when you're sewing the knitted fabric with a rounded tip jersey needle, that tip slips through the threads instead of cutting through them, because it's not as sharp as universal needle, and it creates a smooth seam and the fabric does not get sucked into the inside of the sewing machine. If you're sewing special fabrics, special materials, let's say if you're sewing leather, you have to use a leather needle, which is larger, and it cuts a right size hole into your leather, making sure that again you're getting a durable seam result. Nowadays I have a variety of different needles: silk needle, of course jersey needle, twin needle, universal needles in several different sizes, a few embroidery needles, and I do switch through them between the projects, and it does make a difference. One thing that people often ask, how often you should change a used needle. Some people recommend changing every project. I think it's a little bit too much. Back at sewing school, we would change the needle every week or every other week. So it really depends how much you're sewing. If you're sewing a few evenings a week, I think that you can change the needle like every other month or so. If you're sewing more often than that, changing needle every month is a good way to go. So here are the 5 tips how you can improve your sewing quality. If you like this video, I think you will enjoy watching this video and you can watch it next. Thank you for watching today and I will see you next time. Bye!